Welcome all to the Moses Experience. Really good night tonight. I have the word for you guys. I was reading, welcome, Aaron Bond. I was reading the Exodus where Moses crossed the Red Sea. And, all week I was doing like singing and praying for the Moses Experience. And God was pretty much opening to me that those same blessings that he's done before, he could do it again, and he could do it even more greater or more exceedingly. And he was showing me that because I did the Exodus, the 30 days, 30 minutes, Exodus 30 prayer. And that opened up some doors for me. And I was like asking God, like, what are you doing in this season with the Moses Experience? What changes are going to happen in my lives and the people that are watching? Like, what changes are we going to experience with the Moses Experience? I know one person hopped on here the other day and was like, what is this about? And I wanted to let them know, God opens doors when we pray and when we worship. God opens doors when we call and we seek him. So this is just us calling on the hands of God, or standing at the altar of God and, just asking a request in need for a God, So I just want to read through Exodus 14 and some of Exodus 15. I want to read through it and give you guys what God had gave me in the process of me reading it. There was a deepening of the word that he gave me. He was showing me that, even though he parted the Red Sea for Moses, even though he had Pharaoh's daughter draw Moses up out of water, even though he had Moses draw water from the rock, all these miracles and these changes and these manifestations of God, he was showing Moses, like, anytime you're in water, anytime you're in need of water, anytime you're in a situation where you're needing me, I will be there in the same and like manner. And that's what God was showing Moses all through his life. Pharaoh was killing off the firstborn sons of the Israelites. And, one of them threw Moses in the water, and Pharaoh's daughter pulled him out of water. Anything could have happened to him. He could have drowned. His basket could have flipped over. There could have been gators. There could have been anything that happened in that water, and still God kept him. I was talking to you guys the other day with a word from the Lord, and I was telling you about someone preparing, to go into the deep. And God was showing me that it's not for you to worry about being in the deep or surviving in the deep. It's about the deep surviving you. God gave you the powers over this earth. And he was showing Moses in that process that I've given you power in your hand. I've given you power in that rod. I've given you power in your mouth. And he was showing the children of Israel that he gave them power as well. They didn't get to sit with God like Moses did, but they got the fruit of it. They got the blessing of it. They got the rub off of Moses of it. And I want to show you guys that this Moses Experience is for us to experience in the like manner of how God treated Moses and the Israelites, to experience God on a different level, to experience God in a different way, in a different manner, in a different atmosphere, in a different sound, in a different word. I want to read chapter 14, and it starts with verse 11. If you guys want to read along with me, chapter 14 in Exodus, verse 11. I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to open up to you guys what God gave me. He was giving me a word throughout the week, but just prior to hopping on here, God gave me a word in the midst of reading it, and I want to give that blessing to you guys as well, because it is an awesome word. Okay, so Exodus 40, verse 11. And they said unto Moses, because there were no graves in Egypt, hast thou taken us away to die in the wilderness? Wherefore hast thou dealt thus with us, to carry us forth out of Egypt? Is not this the word that we did tell thee in Egypt, saying, let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? For it had been better for us to serve the Egyptians, that we should die in the wilderness. And Moses said unto the people, fear ye not, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show to you today. For the Egyptians whom ye have seen today, ye shall see them again no more forever. Here Moses is telling the children of Israel that God's got their back. He said, fear ye not, stand still. And that's something I want to tell you guys today, because someone's standing in fear. Someone's scared, and God has you covered. God has your back. Fear ye not. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show you today. He's telling them, for the Egyptians whom ye have seen today, ye shall see them again no more forever. The Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace. It says the Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace. He's telling them to hold back, to pull back, to stand still and wait upon God. What situation is it that God has been telling you to wait upon him? God has been telling you to hold on, I got it. He's been telling you, I got your back. Just hold your peace. Just stand still. I'm preaching to me, myself as well, because I know that there are moments where God pulls me back. God tells me to hold me back. And it's kind of like to say, like, I got this, and I don't need you to fight in this moment. I need you to stand still. Hold your peace. I shall fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. And verse 15, and the Lord said unto Moses, wherefore criest thou unto me? Speak unto the children of Israel that they go forward. Some of you may walk in fear and hold yourselves back from going forward because of the fear that is upon you, that you have to fight for yourself. But God is saying, some of you have never had anyone fight for you. Some of you or someone on this line has never had anyone stand there for them. They've always had to fight for themselves. They've never had anyone protect them and keep them. God is saying in this moment, stand still, hold your peace. I got you. He's saying, speak unto the children of Israel that they go forward. Be not scared of Pharaoh. Don't be scared of Pharaoh. Understand that God has you no matter where you go. And you will see as I go on. But lift thou up thy rod. This is that same rod that God taught Moses how to use, when Moses was standing in fear. This is that same rod that sent the plagues. And stretch out thy hand over the sea and divide it. God is telling Moses in this season right here to stretch out and divide the sea. This is something Moses had never done. Moses had done some miracles with his rod. He had done some great things and manifestations with God and Aaron. But here, he's telling him to divide the sea. Can you imagine that? Having this rod, and you've seen God's miracles, you've seen God work, you heard God, things have changed in your life, and he's saying, now divide the sea. How much faith that takes to divide the sea and trust in God. You got your enemies like coming up behind you. You got this crowd of people that is standing in fear, and it's all depending on you dividing the sea, which you never divided before. Reading on. And the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. This was the kicker that got me. It says, and the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. God is saying go through dry ground in the midst of the sea. Nothing about the sea is dry. So, you telling Moses to divide the sea that he's never divided before and walk through dry ground. You're telling us to see something that we've never seen before. Are you asking us, God, to have faith? Yes. And behold, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they shall follow them, and I will get me honor upon Pharaoh and upon all his hosts, upon his chariots and upon his horsemen. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord. Most of the things and the workings that God does is to show people that he is God, that he is Lord over you. To show how magnificent he is, to show how great he is, to show how powerful he is, to show how powerful you are, to show how great you are, to show how loved you are to him. And that's sometimes that's all the time what God's working is to do. Remember, they said that there was a blind man. They were saying who sinned, his parents or him? How was he born blind? And they said, for the working and manifestations of God to show. Sometimes all the time it's for God's word, God's power to know who God is. Because there's some people that just don't know who God is. They may know of God, but they might not know who God is. And most of the children of Israel needed that working of knowing who God is, because as you see, they were fearing Pharaoh. They were asking, why don't we just go back to Egypt and continue in our slavery? Why did you bring us in the wilderness to die? We could have died there. They were acting in that faith. So now they have to see the faith that Moses has to know the faith that they should have. So here Moses is to part the Red Sea. And they shall follow them, and I will give me honor upon Pharaoh and upon all his hosts, upon his chariots and upon his horsemen. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gotten me honor upon Pharaoh, upon his chariots and upon his horsemen. And the angel of God, which went before the camp of Israel, removed and went behind them, and the pillar of the cloud went from before their face and stood behind them. You know, there was a pillar of a cloud that was directing them as they went through the wilderness. It was lighting up, as well as a pillar of fire, and it was giving them light. And here the same pillar went behind them as the angel of God for the camp of Israel. And it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. And it was a cloud and darkness to them. But it gave light by night to these, so that the one came not near the other all night. And I looked at this, and it gave me a joy to know that God could do this. He took that same cloud. So that cloud was behind them, and the darkness was in front of their enemies. And I saw it. I'm like, you changed the day, God. You changed the day. So the Israelites had daytime, and the Egyptians, their enemy, was in darkness. They were in this darkness. So you mean to tell me that the children of Israel were in the day and the Egyptians were in the night? They weren't even in the same day as them. They weren't even in the same time as them. They weren't even on their level. Do you understand this? Do you see this? The same thing that gave the children of Israel direction was the same thing that protected them behind them. That same thing that guided them in the light, in the darkness. That same light that guided them in the darkness is that same light that went behind them and protected them. That same light changed the day. Changed the night to day. That same light. That's God. So that the one came not near the other all the night. It protected them. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. And the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night. And made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. As you see here, he made the sea dry land, and the waters began to divide. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground. That just sounds like amazing. They went into the midst of the sea upon dry ground. You dried up the sea. I mean, I know we hear about the story of the Red Sea and, Moses parting the sea, and it's an amazing story when you hear it. But when you go into detail of the reading of this, you see the strategic detail that God uses, and direction that God uses for Moses. And he begins to walk and act in obedience. And anything off, any kind of disobedience off can mess up the process. If he does not stretch out his hand, the sea might not have gotten divided. The Egyptians might have caught up with them. So it does take faith. It does take obedience. It does take listening to God. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground. And the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. Can you imagine? Sometimes I just like to picture what they are seeing. You're walking through this, and of course there are some of them walking in fear because the Egyptians are behind them and they're scared. But you're seeing water as a wall on the side. It's divided for you to walk through it. It's got to be an amazing thing to see and to know that God is doing this. And the Egyptians pursued and went in after them to the midst of the sea, even all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. And it came to pass that in the morning, the Lord looked unto the host of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and of the cloud, and troubled the host of the Egyptians, and took off their chariot wheels, that they drave themselves heavily. To that the Egyptians said, Let us flee from the face of Israel. For the Lord fighteth for them against the Egyptians. clogging, and with difficulty. And the Lord said unto Moses, stretch out thy hand over the sea, that the waters may come again upon the Egyptians, upon the chariots, and upon their horsemen. I love how God told Moses to stretch his hand. Before normally he would tell him to stretch his rod, lift up thy rod. In this moment he's telling him to stretch his hand to see how powerful his hand is. I remember he told him to put his hand in the cloak and was teaching him and testing him how to use his hand for his power. And here he stretches out his hand and dries up the sea. The Egyptians upon their chariots and upon their horsemen. And Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its strength. When the morning appeared, and the Egyptians fled against it, the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. And the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen and all the host of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. There remained not so much as one of them. Do you know that God has the power? He has the say so. He has the in every situation. And you might be like, so what did she just say? He has the last say so in every situation. He has the upper hand in every situation. He has the control in every situation. He is the situation. He is the answer. He is the solution. He is the problem. When he steps on the scene, of course there's a problem. But he is the solution and the answer. And I want to tell you guys that because sometimes, people go through things and they're supposed to be believing on and trusting in and having faith in God, that he can do it and that he's capable of doing it. If you praise and worship him, I know we sing this song, but you have to actually believe it. You have to literally believe it. It took a lot of belief in these people to believe in God. It's not just something to talk about. They witness it. Moses was born and thrown into the sea, and he was taken up out of the sea. The children of Israel were in thirst, and Moses hit the rock and provided water for them. And that's what I'm telling you. When Moses was a baby, where would he get his suck from if he was in the water? Pharaoh's daughter sent him back to go get so he doesn't, be malnutrition, so he doesn't thirst. Do you understand that God is there in the last season and in this season, and God will provide for you in each one? Never did Moses deny the power of God. You get what I'm saying? He's like, even when I was a baby, God kept me and took care of me. For sure he'll do it now. And he did it in the same manner. When they were thirsty, he gave them water out of a rock. When the water was at its wit's end and their enemy was chasing them and he had to get through the water, God divided it. When he was a baby and there was no parent to parental him, God supplied Pharaoh's daughter and she sends him back to get milk. That's a beautiful thing how God continuously takes care of Moses, and he takes care of you as well. And the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen and all the host of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. There remained not so much as one of them. I love how God keeps using the blessings that he blessed the children of Israel with. He's using that same blessing as a protection. He's using that same blessing as a weapon towards the enemy. Isn't that an amazing thing? So sometimes, I love how he says pray for your enemies, because he tells me that as you pray for your enemies, you receive a friend, and I'll show you this. But the children of Israel walked upon dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the seashore. And Israel saw that great work which the Lord did upon the Egyptians. And the people feared the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. It says here, this is the Concordance Bible. It says hand or respected. And the people feared the Lord, and the people respected the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. I don't want to say it took all that, because even that process when Moses was a baby, that story keeps everybody in believing of Moses. But it takes that for some people to see the faith and hand of God to believe. Even Pharaoh, all those plagues and all that, you still didn't believe, you still went up against Moses. And I don't want to say this to say you have to believe out of the story. You have to believe. Sometimes situations occur in your life personally that will pull you out to believe. Sometimes people, similar to me, you were probably brought up in the church and you were, I don't want to say forced, but that's just pretty much what your habitat and what you were around. So you ended up believing it because you heard it every day. And then eventually you one day saw it. So now you continuously believe it. But some people probably didn't get to see it and they haven't experienced one day at church or a friend or end up on their knees or with their hands raised. There was that moment where Moses was lifting his hands and they prevailed against Amalek, and he lifted up his hands and they were there to hold up his hands as he got tired. He would put them down and they would, lose, and he would put them back up and they would prevail. And there got a moment where Moses' strength wasn't enough to keep his hands up. And I want to tell you guys that sometimes, in the process of your praise towards God, that's where your strength comes from. And it might not just come from you, and it might not just come from God. It may come from a friend. It may come from someone that God sends. And, it's not always, just you and God. God will send someone else as a blessing towards you. I want to tell you guys that, because there's someone out there that doesn't have enough strength to even raise their hands and worship God. I'm telling you on today that if you can just get your hands halfway, God will hear you. If you could just get your hands halfway, God will send someone to lift it up. If you could just get your hands halfway, God will answer and he will prevail on your behalf. If you can just get your hands halfway, he will fight for you and you will win. If you can get your hands halfway, you will see you're prevailing out of your situation. If you can just get your hands halfway, you will see God. That's the word on tonight for the Moses experience. I want to read the beginning of chapter 15 because it blessed me before I go. It says, here it says, they then sang Moses and the children of Israel. I love this. They begin to sing after all of this. Then sang Moses and the children of Israel this song unto the Lord, and spake, saying, I will sing unto the Lord, for he hath triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider hath he thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength and song, and he has become my salvation. He is my God, and I will prepare him an habitation. My father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. Thy right hand, O Lord, is become glorious in power. Thy right hand, O Lord, hath dashed in pieces the enemy. How great is our God? That's enough about the Moses experience today. That was Exodus 14 and 15. Please go read it on your own. It'll bless you. Much love. Be blessed. Have a good night.